Welcome to Harlem Capital's More Equity podcast. We're so happy you're here. My name is Melody Hahm, and I lead community and platform at HCP. This season, I have the privilege of speaking with 5 incredible Latina luminaries. Venture capital funding for Latino businesses has had a disappointing trajectory since its peak in 2018. Latino founders get only 2% of VC funding, with only 0.4% going to Latino women. That's why we believe it's imperative to invest in this growing yet mighty community that's committed to paving the path for others. More Equity's Latina Luminaries takes you through the journeys of 5 women building world-changing businesses across the United States and Latin America. From their unconventional career paths to the nitty-gritty of fundraising, they share how they're pursuing their dreams and serving as a lighthouse for the next generation. Hope you enjoy the conversations as much as I did. In today's episode, I speak with Noelle Acosta, the founder and CEO of Noula, a healthcare startup backed by Muse Capital and Precursor Ventures. Noula is focused on personalized reproductive and hormonal support, and Noelle's story is one of fascinating intersecting personal and professional passions. She shares how not getting into med school may have been the best thing to happen to her. Take a listen. We're delighted to have you today and so excited to dive deep into your story.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Melody.
Yeah, so we love here on the More Equity podcast just learning more about you as an individual. Before we jump into Noula, would love to hear kind of your origin story, kind of trace the fibers of your journey so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many founders will feel this way, but I feel like my path here was very unconventional. I had always been interested in women's health, first and foremost. I actually studied pre-med in undergrad. My goal was to become an OBGYN. But a few things could have happened. One, when I was shadowing some physicians during my undergrad years, I found myself kind of being a little spooked by the physicians I shadowed. They basically encouraged me not to go that route. And I was like, okay, I hear that, but I'm still going to apply anyway. And I didn't get into med school when I did apply. I interviewed, didn't get in. And I was kind of at this point in the road where I was like, okay, now, well, what do I do now? And part of the way I actually I actually worked throughout undergrad, and part of the way I supported myself was actually through my own little side hustles. And I'm a big dog lover, so I essentially started my own dog walking business in San Francisco, walk dogs around the city in between my classes. And then I also actually started a subscription box company for dog owners with a couple $100s. Grew it to over 100 monthly subscribers, this is before like Instagram was a thing or any ads, anything like that. And so really that's how I support myself. I ended up selling off my client list after about a year of doing that because it just became too much to handle with on top of, upper division science courses. I was taking classes like genetics and cellular neuroscience. I was like, okay, this is too hard. And so that was kind of my first taste of the entrepreneurial journey. And I really liked it. And so after I graduated, didn't get into med school, I truly had no idea what I wanted to do. I took a summer job at a cycling studio, SoulCycle, just to kind of buy myself some time to figure out my next steps. And that's when, I stumbled into tech sales. And I felt like, I'll do this while I save up for med school and try to reapply again. And I actually ended up really loving it. I loved being able to contribute to the growth of early stage startups. I remember my very first job was a sales development rep where I was cold calling every single day out of this tiny office park in San Mateo. And there were just six of us all sitting at these tiny little IKEA desks. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed contributing to the growth of that company and just seeing the fruits of my own labor in terms of the hustle that it takes to be in sales. And so I ended up building my career in tech sales here in the Bay Area and in New York. And so really spent most of my career contributing to high growth startups, leading and scaling those sales and business development syndicates through record breaking revenue milestones. Three of those companies are now unicorns. Most recently, I was at a company called Maven Clinic, where I joined around like right when we raised our Series B and left shortly after we raised our Series D, putting us as the first women's health unicorn. That's when I left to jumpstart my own vision building Noula. And I'm happy to kind of share a little bit more about my personal story as to why Noula, but that,
For
you tell me if
sure.
you have any questions.
Yeah, I feel like I love early stage founders' stories because so often, and eventually Series D, Series E folks as well, but I feel like most particularly when you're first building, the personal mission statement of you as an individual is so deeply interwoven with that of the company,
Mhm.
right? Like one wouldn't exist without the other. So yeah, would be curious to hear about your identity, how you grew up, and how it sort of intersected with your desire to launch a personal healthcare tech startup.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I am biracial, I'm mixed. So I am half Mexican, half Filipino. Grew up in the Central Valley here in California, and um, I would say what's been, I, I'm sure quite a few folks might relate to this too. Growing up with like this multitude of ethnicities is like I never really felt truly connected to either side of my cultures. Growing up, I was never Latina enough to hang out with the Latino kids. I also was never Asian enough to hang out with the Asian kids. And my parents were both very much forced to assimilate. So neither of them speak, any other language besides English. And so oftentimes, even today, sometimes I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome claiming that I'm Latina because it's half of who I am. And I also just, have recently become much more in tune with my roots and much more curious about who I am, where does my family come from, to really just get a better understanding of that. So that was always just an interesting dynamic growing up where I never saw myself in my own cultures. And I even felt that way throughout my career, and especially as a founder, right? When you think of founders and CEOs, they often don't look like me. I don't come from an Ivy League background. I went to San Francisco State University. They also are very rarely people of color, especially women of color. There's more CEOs named John than there are all female CEOs. And Latino women have, the odds stacked against them. Like only 0.4% of us are able to raise venture capital dollars. I'm one of less than 100 Latino women to ever raise $1 million. And while I'm proud, it's also incredibly disheartening for the system. So it's deeply important that, we can create this path for everyone to see themselves in the ecosystem because it should be designed for us. There's like tons of studies that show the amount of impact we can have in terms of contributing to innovation and really accelerating, the future ahead. So that's really kind of where I found myself is I don't quite truly see myself just yet, but I'm very bullish on becoming that lighthouse for all women and all founders of color.
Yeah, I think this season is entitled Latino Luminaries for a reason. And I am curious, who is a luminary? It can be the first person that pops into your mind who has paved the way for you. Who do you kind of think of when you're like, man, without this individual, this journey would have been much tougher?
Yeah, that's a great question. I truly, I think there's been different people at different points of my journey. Uh, First and foremost, like really are my parents. My father grew up in Santa Ana. Um, Neither of my parents have a college education. And so seeing him just be able to grow his own career and build a life for himself and our family, as a Latino man in, the 70s, 80s, um, that's been really inspiring to me to see him continue to defy the odds there, despite having a college education. My mother immigrated from the Philippines as a child, and she, she supported us at home, and just even seeing her later in life finding who she is and finding work to that makes her happy is really deeply inspiring. That it's never too late to put yourself first and the way take care of yourself the way you want to be, and even just chase your dreams, right? And so I would say like my parents there, and then truly I would say the folks who took the first bet on me, the Visible Hands team. Right away I saw myself in that team, especially Justin, Daniel, and Yasmin, the general partners at Visible Hands. And I think that was the first time I really felt that the space was welcome for people that look like me. They were just incredibly supportive from the very beginning. The minute I met them, I knew I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to be funded by Visible Hands and take this leap of faith. And then, I'm not ashamed to also admit that I do, I feel a bit inspired by myself and through my own personal connection to Noula's mission. Um, I was a patient who faced a personal brush with the gaps in healthcare with a chronic reproductive health condition, and was kind of thrown into this abyss and forced to tread on my own, trying to figure out what was going on with my body. And so just being able to um, find myself steering and navigating that ship on my own really served as the inspiration to build Noula, especially because the more I spoke to other folks, especially women of color, the more I realized I wasn't alone in this journey.
Yeah. Kind of transitioning to Noula in a nutshell, right? As I understand it, Noula does make that personalized reproductive health info and support more accessible, right? Through
Hmm.
affordable at home testing, um, and really figuring out nutrition, digital care plans, and allowing a more structured DIY approach.
Uh-huh.
Full disclosure, I am over 9 months pregnant right now. And
Congrats.
so thank you. So you have no idea how much a lot of what you're saying, as I think about Noula, as I look into Noula, um, how much I do recognize the opportunity and the need for products like these. I am curious, you worked at Maven Clinic most recently, so I'm
Uh-huh.
assuming a lot of your work there kind of sparked the origin of Noula as well, in addition to your own personal
Uh-huh.
journey in healthcare. Curious how you ended up with this specific value proposition and this specific offering, and maybe even how it has evolved over the last year and a half or so that you've been building the product.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's really, it goes back to 2019. In 2019, I was working for a smaller tech company here in the Bay Area, and I had switched birth control methods. I was pressured to go on birth control as a teenager by my doctor, so I truly have not known what my body is like without hormonal birth control. And in 2019, I switched methods. And after doing that, it really disrupted every aspect of my life. I had chronic migraines. Was constantly fatigued. I found myself truly having to leave conference rooms to puke from the pain of my migraines. Um, and I was menstruating for 7 months straight. And so not only did it disrupt my physical body, but really it was an emotional roller coaster. I was in and out of the doctor's office as someone who had wonderful employer sponsored health insurance, access to high quality care, and also just greater health literacy. I was still the 1 in 5 women who were being dismissed, denied, and ignored by the healthcare system. I was constantly brushed off, being told, you're probably just stressed, or here's a new birth control prescription, try this one instead. And so I think I tried 7 different birth controls over that period of time. And 70% of millennials, I just ended up losing that trust in healthcare and seeking out answers on my own. So I turned to Dr. Google and spent countless hours researching medical journals about like what could potentially be wrong with my body. And I remember going back to the doctor office on month 7, waving these like printouts of medical journals, even ordering my own testing, trying to figure out like what could this be. And I brought the stack of papers and I demanded an ultrasound. And they're like, okay, fine. Like, we'll get you an ultrasound. I got one scheduled right away. And I ended up having over 40 abnormal follicles and cysts on my ovaries, which was contributing to all the pain and my symptoms. And I was just flabbergasted that it took me that long to finally get some sort of answers to what was causing. Um, my symptoms and also how much I had to really like stop my feet and demand for care in that moment. And even at that point, my treatment plan was just another Band-Aid fix. It was, all right, let's put your former birth control back in. Call us when you're ready to have a baby. And so that also added to my frustration that like am I like my why is my health not worthy of being its best right now? Why is my that kind of rooted in my ability or desire to have a child when I want that child, right? And so I grew incredibly frustrated and I knew I wanted to change that, right? And so I actually started, seeking out Facebook groups, next door, Reddit threads, and just sharing my story with other women and people with uteruses who really, we were all bonded by these shared frustrations. And while we might have had the same diagnosis of PCOS, our journeys and symptoms were very, very different too. And so I knew I wanted to change that. And I decided to make the leap from the tech startup, the SaaS startup I was working for at the time, and go into digital health. I knew that in order to make sure that what is now Noula would be successful, I needed to contribute to a high growth digital health company. I needed to fail fast, fail as much as I could, fail fast, fail forward, so I can really build this foundation of knowledge to ensure that I can make sure that Noula is as successful as possible. And so that's what I did. I turned down the opportunity to open up an entire new office in sales and business development syndicate for that tech startup at the time, and instead joined Maven Clinic. Um, and Maven was such a phenomenal company to work for at the time. That's actually where I ended up meeting my now co-founder, who was the founding engineer at Maven Clinic. And there, I just was so proud to be contributing to such an important mission, improving access to care. And so, really, from those experiences, I found kind of like two things. Like one, access to care is incredibly important for us to get the care that we deserve, especially when as a country, only 50% of counties have access to an OBGYN. So really, per OBGYN, they're seeing about 3,500 patients. On average, are spending less than 15 minutes with their patients. And more often than not, women and people with uteruses are navigating or dealing with more than 2 chronic conditions. And that's not enough time with their clinicians. And then the other piece too is I think like over the last 10 years, we've seen the spike and rise um, in telehealth, right? So, and I think that was definitely exacerbated in a positive way by COVID, where we became much more comfortable, picking up our smartphones and connecting with a doctor on demand. But now we're also at this tipping point where we have more data about our bodies now than ever. But how are we using that data to really understand how to proactively take care of our health on an ongoing basis, right? From a mental health perspective, we're taught to take care of that proactively on a weekly basis in a way that's individualized to us, our unique goals, our history, not until a mental break happens or, right? But our healthcare is still very much reactive and transactional and one size fits all. As I like to say, one size fits men. Um, and and so really, I think we're going to start to see this inflection where we're seeing the marriage of the two, of combining personalized data to deliver tailored care. And that's where Noula is stepping in. So Noula is really designed to empower patients and their providers with this personalized health insights about their bodies. We're starting with hormonal health data and then using that to provide tailored, comprehensive care, both virtually and in person.
Yeah. I'm curious, especially with your experience at Maven. And I know the meteoric success and rise of Maven across employer sponsored plans, and it being kind of a go-to option and the first thought, right, when employers are
Mhm.
thinking about maternal health care. Um, how is your approach different? As I
Yeah.
understand it, you're still, you're targeting the average consumer, like an
Uh-huh.
individual like myself could sign up. Is your
Uh-huh.
ultimate vision and goal to also be going B2B? I'm curious about your philosophy there.
So our vision is very different, right? I think the employers sponsoring benefit space is incredible in terms of giving folks access to care through their employers at really like no cost to the employee, but a cost to the employer. Where we are truly focused is in the consumer space. So we're starting with the consumer health aspect, really ensuring that's accessible and affordable for everyone. And again, where it's Nula is designed for not just a white collar worker, but where someone who might not typically who faces the greatest access barriers to care can sign up for Nula for free. And so we've created a variety of, or I guess like we've created different subscription tiers to meet patients where they are versus the other way around. So while we're starting there, like our vision truly is to be that healthcare partner for you as an insurance covered partner and really supporting folks through that kind of quote unquote B2B angle. So will be through that versus the employer side.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You've had, you mentioned COVID, you mentioned, just the current macro landscape we're all navigating. You've had no shortage, I would say, of tailwinds as well as headwinds as you've been building this business. What's been perhaps one surprising discovery, surprising obstacle that you've had to deal with? If you don't mind getting a little candid here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually like to share this very openly because I think oftentimes as founders, we get just like so much tunnel vision on one specific product that, that's really where it's hard to deviate from that. Like we're a horse with blinders on. And while we have always truly seen ourselves as the healthcare partner designed to adapt with you for life from menstruation through menopause, our initial hypothesis was truly in supporting folks in their family planning journey. So people who are planning to have a family someday, pregnant or recently postpartum. So after I built or I guess like I should say, when we built our first beta product, that was our hypothesis was that it was designed for the folks in the family planning journey. And so we went out and brought on 100 users to the platform for this closed beta. And what we found was actually our hypothesis could not be more untrue. Our least engaged users were pregnant people. And so while that was the first kind of wave of users, we found that the scale had tipped significantly. Um, More people who were coming to Neula and asking to be a part of our beta, or the more that, we actually sought out and spoke to people about Nula, we found that the people who wanted support through Nula were folks who very much had similar stories to mine. They had unexplained symptoms. They weren't getting answers from the traditional healthcare settings. They were turning to sources that lacked credibility and science backed information like Facebook groups and Reddit threads, and really just trying to self diagnose themselves. And they were coming to us in truly like this such a vulnerable state saying, I don't know where else to go. I feel like this is my last shot of truly understanding what is going on with me and how I can actually feel better. And so we saw this tipping point where 80% of our beta users ended up falling into that, like really falling into that bucket versus um, pregnant or a fertility focus. And that immediately lit off the light bulb. In proving our other hypothesis is that Neula truly can be designed to support you and adapt with you for life beyond just a specific stage in your journey. And so we leaned into that, really revamped a lot of our messaging to align with what our customers were telling us. So that was probably like the biggest shot. It's like, oh, or shock was like, oh, we built this product that was really designed for family building. People aren't using that way. So we had to get very creative and hacky with how we were using the existing data, especially because I had really no money. to rebuild a whole new product at that point. And it was very manual. It was not scalable whatsoever, which I mean, in the early days, it shouldn't be, right? And that was where we were able to find early indicators for our niche. And so after that beta concluded, we went back to rebuilt our entire product. And so what you see in Noula today is a reflection of the thousands of conversations that we've had, um, everywhere from the early customer discovery days, which hasn't stopped. I still actually talk to our customers and get their feedback, hop on Zoom calls with them to understand what they like about Noula, what they don't like, um, and go from there. So we're really, really proud to be in a position where we can adapt and mold with the voice of our customers at the center.
When it comes to the accessibility piece, as I understand it, obviously tying back to your Latina roots, but also recognizing that women of color suffer the most across the board when it comes to not being taken seriously, not having their pain and suffering being recognized to the fullest extent. The Nula app will launch in Spanish as well.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious, as you think about the pricing model and how you've sort of finessed and figured out what is the best approach, because correct me if I'm wrong, this wouldn't be covered by insurance plans, correct? It would be out
Not
of
today.
pocket. Okay.
So the testing is not covered by insurance, and that's across like any kind of at-home hormone testing company. Unfortunately, healthcare insurance isn't designed to allow us to, proactively take care of our health in that way. But where we do focus on the accessibility pieces in kind of a few parts. One, like you can track your symptoms in Neula free, right? That's not going away. Our subscription plans can start as little as $2 a week. So, with our initial promotional pricing. And so we are very, very bullish on making this as accessible for anyone and everyone. We are a social benefit corporation as well. So we do give users the option to kind of pay it forward if they want to add another $2 onto the subscription to gift a Neula subscription to folks who have low incomes to use Neula. They can. And then lastly, as we roll out telehealth, that those appointments are insurance covered. So we are able to connect our members with Neula clinicians in a way that's insurance covered. And so we're rolling those out state by state. So our vision is, someday, very in the near future, Neula will have telehealth coverage that's insurance covered throughout the entire U.S.
Fantastic. Yeah, look forward to hearing updates there. I do want to touch upon your fundraising journey. Being one of 100 Latino women who have raised $1 million, which is pretty remarkable in a bad way, I would say, but staggering nonetheless. I'm curious. You ended up closing a $1.4 million pre-seed round last year, led by Muse and Precursor. Tell me about, take us back. Tell me about the fundraising journey. Um, Obviously, the climate was much different from what we're experiencing today in terms of the market. But was it difficult for you? Did you feel like because you come from a sales and BD background, there was a little bit more context you could provide, and kind of exactly what buyers want to hear, right? In this context, investors. Yeah, would love some color there.
Yeah, I think my sales and BD background definitely helped. I knew that one, it was largely going to be a numbers game. Two, I knew based on the math. Like I can also be too analytical to a fault, but I knew by the math if I was having if 0.4% of Latina women were able to raise venture dollars, I needed to have 200 meetings to get one yes. And so, I think I essentially set this goal, right? I had joined an accelerator called Visible Hands that supported us for 3 months. We got a 25K investment up front. And at the end of the program, I had, enough money saved to support myself for a couple more months. But I was like, okay, by the end of February of 2022, I need to close around. Otherwise, I'm going to have to put Neula I'd have to put Neula into, like a part-time um, gig for myself and, go into the job market. And so I worked backwards from that goal. I was like, okay, I need to close my round by this. This is how much I need. What do I need to do to prove that Noula was venture backable? So, and I also had I didn't know a single VC besides the Visible Hands team at that point. So I knew I needed to build a network. I knew I needed to show that there was traction with Noula, that this was a problem worth solving and one that can scale in terms of like having an impact on people's lives, but ultimately also show that it could be a $1 billion business. And so I set these weekly milestones and worked backwards from those, and just literally was laser focused on proving out traction in a number of areas. Like, one, why I'm the right founder for solving this problem. Two, are people willing to pay for something like Noula and use Noula? And is it scalable? Like, can we demonstrate strong LTV and margins? And so from that, and then obviously, like in the very beginning, do I have a good story? Like, can I tell the Noula story well in a compelling way to get investors bought in on our mission? Because very early on, like, again, they're really great investors are making a bet on founder fit at the pre-seed stage. And I think just my beta learning alone is like proof that, what I initially raised on actually looks very different in terms of, or I guess like who we were raising for. It looks very different than what Noula, who Noula serves today. But with that, I was just grinding as much as I could. I was biking all around San Francisco, chasing down if they made eye contact with me, I was chasing them down and asking them to talk to me about their experience navigating.
You're like, hey, you have money? You look relatively wealthy.
Well, first this was actually for potential customers.
Right.
Like if I saw a woman or person with a uterus within the target demographic age group that was what I had hypothesized would be our users, I chased them down. So I talked to the people on the street. I posted in Nextdoor, reached out to people in Facebook groups, and I think within 2 weeks I had over 100 customer discovery calls with people. Didn't pay them a dime. And I think that was a testament in itself that people wanted to talk about the struggles that they faced and the barriers they faced. And so and that was something that really allowed me to spot patterns and trends in terms of what's missing. And then from there, I practice pitching every single day. Any person or any investor that, even if they weren't a right fit for me, I didn't know any investors. So even if they weren't a right fit for me, if they were somehow affiliated with Visible Hands and they did a talk for the cohort, I would immediately follow up with them after and see if they'd be willing to listen to the pitch and give me feedback and see if they could introduce me to other folks. And I know we get a lot of advice as founders is like, if someone says no to you, like, don't ask them for interest to anyone else. But I truly had no option. I was like, this is a numbers game. I need to get to that 200. I'm going to ask for interest no matter what. And it did work out. That actually ended up working out well. And so I was just laser focused and went during the actual pitching process to chase as many no's as possible. The sooner I could get to a no, the better, right? Because I knew I wouldn't have to be spinning my wheels on folks. I found myself, in doing myself a disservice when some investors were having me do like songs and dances to, try to convince them. I was like, okay, this isn't the right fit. I even had this was very, very difficult for me, but there were times where I had to say, okay, you know what? As much as I need this money, this investor is not a right fit for me, right? Like I was pitching to one male investor who asked me what menstruation was. Like, that is not the right fit.
Oh boy.
And
where do we even begin with that conversation?
I know. So, I think like knowing who the right partner was for me was also going to be incredibly important. And then Twitter actually ended up being such a great vehicle for building my investor network too. I had a tweet that went viral and it literally had nothing to do with Noula. It was a self-deprecating tweet that I made about myself, like just joking around that grew my following. And so, I was able to then just get in front of more investors somehow and on Twitter where they were actually reaching out to me through DMs. And
What was the
so that was
tweet?
really, I said, I said, being a founder means like scarfing down a bagel in 3 minutes over the sink like a rat before your next call. And I got a lot of like hateful DMs for that too, but which was pretty funny because they're like, bagels are so dense. Why are you eating that? I'm like, go away.
You're like, that's not the point.
And I was like, I just mismanaged my day for like, I usually carve out lunch. I mismanaged my day. Like, it's not a big deal. But
Yeah.
I think I gained like over like 1,500 followers in like 2 days from that.
Twitter will do that.
It will do
Yeah.
it. So anyways, but those were kind of like how I went about, building out my network and ecosystem. And the Muse Capital team and Precursor Ventures were our earliest believers. We've raised 2.4 million in 2022, actually, which was something that I'm incredibly proud of, especially since we saw how um, how the impact on the ecosystem in Q4 and even trickling to today. But yeah.
Had you raised a bridge round after
Yeah.
that initial?
Mhm.
Okay. And then I know you were one of the first folks to be selected for the Google Startup
Yes.
Accelerator as well. So there's a
Y
lot of different pieces here that you clearly were wildly successful in convincing folks.
uh
Did you end up having 200 conversations? What was the total count?
So I actually didn't end up having 200. What's funny is it's truly such an emotional roller coaster and things happen so quickly. So I think I had over 100 conversations. And this was over the period like from like and like the week before Thanksgiving to early February. During this time, I was also diagnosed with epilepsy. It was just a very emotionally tolling and like very like I I can't even describe the feelings that I had when I went through fundraising because I was dealing. I mean, I went to BBG Ventures holiday party where I actually met Gabby with 30 electrodes attached to my head because I was going through epilepsy testing. But I was like, I need to keep going, and that was challenging in itself. Luckily, I'm totally okay. But I was raising, while dealing with these health issues. And I remember some investors even told me, like, you shouldn't be showing up like this or telling people that you have epilepsy because they're going to think you're going to die and you lose all of our money. And so, just hearing stuff like that, even though it's such a common disease, was also a little disheartening. But I knew in my gut that from my own experience and the conversations that I had with so many people that we needed to build better healthcare. And so I had about 100 meetings. The week before I closed my round and oversubscribed my round, I had an investor pull out completely, and it left me with only 300K raised. And I was like, okay, I can make it. I can probably stretch myself through end of March, but if not, I'm just gonna have to return these people's money because there's no way I can do this. And then a week later, I had to turn away money. So it was just absolutely I remember crying on my kitchen floor like, "Oh, I'm letting these people like, I'm letting everyone down because this investor pulled out. There goes my round." And then the following week, Muse Capital came in, wanting to lead the round, and then I reconnected with Precursor, and this is where I used my sales skills, and I said, "Charles, if you can come in on this amount, I'll close my round today." And he was like, "Done." And so that's what I did. And then I remember I had a small amount left over. Um, and for like to oversubscribe the round for the financial cap that I had. And I basically had to negotiate with something. Okay, there were two folks that I really liked. I was like, if you come in at a smaller amount and you come in at a smaller amount, like you both can come in. And then after that, I had to turn some checks away. So that was like a like, and
What a
just a very
whirlwind.
a whirlwind of an experience.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear your health is okay.
Yep.
And it's a very meta situation too, right? Because we started this conversation by talking about how so many women of color overlook their own health or are
Uh-huh.
not necessarily prioritizing it. So hopefully also a sobering reminder to you that even as you're building this really important product for others, you kind of have to do the self-care and be investing in yourself and your own health. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
so important, and right,
yeah.
and that's something that we also encourage within our team overall. Like we, even though like we're a super early stage company, but we do encourage our team members to, find space to take care of themselves, however they need to be taken care of.
Yeah. If you weren't building Noula, what would you be doing right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd like to think that I'm funny enough to be in like a comedy skit, but I think my
Oh.
husband would disagree. Um, but if it wasn't for Nula, I'd be building something in the house space. It's something that after again, like once you've experienced a problem so painful, like you just you so obsessive over solving that pain that I would be doing that. So who knows? Maybe I would have gone to med school, but I wouldn't be doing anything but Nula.
Mm. Well, you have truly a remarkable story. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again for joining us, Noelle, on Harlem Capital's More Equity podcast. Love speaking with
Thank you
you.
so much. Likewise, it's been a pleasure.